Hello and welcome to another Help Me Place tutorial. In this video I'll show you how to quickly set up a fresh scene with Help Me Place. I'll also go through all of the available options to you. So first off, in a brand new scene we're going to create a terrain and we're going to add the Help Me Place prefab to the scene. Let's take a second to ensure that our gizmos are enabled in the scene view. Now we can go ahead and add some prefab groups. Prefab group is a way of organizing your prefabs so you can easily swap between groups that have specific contents. So let's go ahead and add 2 of those now. We can fold them up, reorder them, all of that kind of stuff. So in the first group here, let's call it buildings. Random from row means that it will randomly swap between them after you place one. So for buildings, probably we don't want that, but I'll show you how that works once we activate the tool. Desired parent, if you have already got, say for example, a place where you've added houses in the scene too, you could drag this in here, and everything that spawns from this group will go into that transform in the hierarchy. So let's leave that blank for now because Help Me Place actually will organize the pieces for you, and I'll go through that as well. Next we have the prefab list, so let's add maybe 4 of them. So let's lock it up here so that it won't disappear if we misclick. We're going to go into the examples prefabs folder, and you'll see we've got a bunch of houses and different props and stuff like that already included for you. So let's add a couple of these randomly. Maybe house 3 gray, house 4 brown perhaps, and we'll close that up. We'll make trees group. So let's go into our prefabs again. Let's add blender tree 1, sorry, 2 prefabs. Let's put blender tree 1 and blender tree 2, and let's turn on random for a row for this one. That's pretty much the entirety of the setup you need. We can go ahead and enable it now, and straight away you'll see the prefabs are showing up at the top here from group 1. You can press W and S to go through the groups. These are reorderable, so you can move the trees up to the top if you want them to be the first thing, say if you're making this so that you can bring it into other scenes. So let's go ahead and straight away you'll notice that the blueprint is actually offset under the ground. So some prefabs will be like this. It all depends on how you import it from whatever modeling tool you've used to create it. So Help Me Place actually has a way to fix that with you. So we can go ahead to the configuration section here, and I'll just show you. We'll go through this properly in a wee while, but the helper control is here for syncing. So control adjust sync amount. So if you hold control at this point and you drag it up, then you'll notice that it pulls it up out of the ground. And now when we place these, you'll notice that the ground level is set for these guys. The same now will be true for the others. So nice and quickly, I'm going to go ahead and sorry, I turned this off by accident. You can't turn it off. I think that's quite handy as well to be able to do that, because sometimes you're going to be holding control and you're not really going to want to be adjusting the sync amount every time. So let's just go through, fix up our sync amounts. It's also quite nice for like rocks and stuff. You can sink them into the ground. In some cases, you'll want that kind of control over the Y position of it. So let's pull that up. If you're using much bigger prefabs, you can adjust the amount of sync that you do. So let's put it at 0.1, and you'll notice that with even like, you know, it's just much more aggressive in its movement. So 0.01 works for prefabs of this scale. So let's go ahead and go through some more features here. Okay, so let's go into the trees, make sure that they're set up correctly as well. Open it up and you can see the changes, of course, in real time using the blueprint. And now I'm going to talk about that random from row item here in the prefab group. So now let's go in as far as the trees, and let's start adding some with random from row enabled. So you can see here it's randomly choosing between the 2 prefabs available. You'll also notice here that one of the trees has popped in. Sorry, the lighting in this scene is awful by default. Has popped in on top of the other. So you'll notice our ground layer here is set to pretty much everything. So we can place things on other stuff. If we want to change that so that we are only affecting the ground layer, let's go ahead and disable the tool. You can also use escape to disable the tool as long as the scene view is given focus or selected. All of the hotkeys available to you using help me place will work. So hitting escape in the scene view will deactivate the tool. So let's go ahead and change the terrains layer. So let's go ahead to the terrain, change the layer to ground. So what I did here was I just went into add layer, I added the ground layer, and then I selected the terrain again and changed it to the ground. So now we can go in and tell help me place to only affect that layer. So let's change it from everything to just ground, just ground. So you could flip between nothing and ground in order to deselect everything first. It's quite handy. So now when we enable the tool, you'll notice it's not taking into account the layer that the buildings are on, and we can put things only on the terrain and we get no stack up. So very handy for if you're building a town or village, city, whatever, just having that ability. Also, if you wanted to have certain things only appear on a table, then you just change the ground layer then to whatever the layer is for the table or the house. If you want to put, I don't know, anything. It covers a lot of different use cases. So you'll notice that everything that we've spawned here is put into its own groups. This is what I was talking about earlier. So all the houses are in spawned group buildings and all the trees are in spawned group trees. So that's what the options here, the desired parent, would override this behavior. So yeah, you can let help me place handle it, or you can give it your own group parents. Also random from row, we've gone through that. So let's close up the prefab groups stuff. That's pretty much the core of the system. Everything else is like just it kind of builds off that. So let's go over to a bit of the blank over here, and we'll talk about some rotation modes. I'm going to go into the houses for this one because it's quite easy to see. So by default, the first rotation mode is going to be smooth. So it's just a smooth rotation. Right click will go counterclockwise and left click will go clockwise. You'll notice as well that help me place forces the hand tool, which is quite handy so that you don't move on to other tools by clicking when you're doing these kind of actions. So so we can hold shift here to double the speed that it rotates at, which is quite nice. We can also adjust the smooth sensitivity by the slider down here. So that can be really nice for quickly setting up a couple of buildings all in a circle. But there's better tools for that included as well. So let's go over a bit further and I'll talk about the next rotation mode, which is snap. So it's going to snap at 45 degrees to its current rotation. So every click will snap at 45 degrees. If we go back with the right click, it'll rotate 45 degrees in the counterclockwise. This is all configurable. Over here we can set it to 20 degrees. Let's, for example, give you a much smaller snap. Very, very handy feature for going around streets and corners and all of that kind of stuff. Let's choose a different house here for the next one. Let's go with fixed. So fixed actually takes the last amount that was given, and it was actually almost 20 degrees. Very, very close to 20 degrees. So this will not change if we click the mouse. So they're all at the exact same rotation, which is quite nice. Next is random rotation. So every time you place one, it will randomly choose. It might not be too obvious with that prefab. This one much better though. You can see how it's randomly rotating the blueprint after every time it places one. So you get some nice nice layouts that way. Next, let's move on to the look at and look away from modes. So you'll notice straight away that all of the hotkeys, by the way, are shown up here on the top left. This E with the little target icon shows up. So by default, it's set to vector 30. You can put in a fixed amount here, which is fine, or you can hit E to set it on the layer that you've chosen here. It'll just shoot a ray and find a nice spot, and then you can have all your houses or prefabs. This works with anything, scene objects or prefabs. So you can have them all looking towards the blue mark. So you can get some really nice layouts this way, like a nice town center or circular cities, a nice figure of 8 perhaps. Very quickly works out those rotations for you. And we'll talk more about this one. There's also a look away from. So if I go back to the first one, because it's like a T shape and it's very easy to see which way it's facing. So say we had a city like this going on, we could use look away from to, you know, match the rotation almost. And let's go back then with Shift or we'll go back to the previous. So, you know, something like that. And then or we'll go to the next. You get the idea. At this stage, I'd like to take a second to talk about some of the helpers that are available. So if we hit tab here, you'll notice that the scene kind of darkens a wee bit just because it's a projector has been turned on. So if you open up the projectors, or sorry, the helpers underneath Help Me Play System, you'll see that we've added a few maps here. And this is something very popular with like Blender and stuff like that. If you're doing a model in Blender, you want to have an image generally of what you're modeling in the scene with you. So in this case, we've added 4 of these things, all with their own materials that you can modify to your heart's content, change up whatever sketch you want. As long as it's a sprite, we found it works quite well with this kind of method. So bring in whatever drawing or sketch you want, or Photoshop object, whatever. Throw it in here as a sprite, and then we can move it around. It doesn't really matter about the position. Let's turn off Help Me Play so that we can get to this tool. And let's move one of these fellas over here. Now let's re-enable Help Me Place. Also, by the way, tab will turn on. Sorry, the tool has to be enabled for the hotkeys to work, but tab will turn on and off this this feature. So if we set our center point again to right in the center here, and let's change to this guy, and let's say we can change it over here or use the hotkey or. So let's say look towards, and let's start putting these guys in here. Oops. It's also fully Control Z will undo the enabled. So it has undo HMP spawn house. So that's an action that we've done with Help Me Place. And we can just put in now a nice circular zone. It doesn't have to be perfect, obviously, it's just a guide. So you can see the power of this right away, right? So if we go in now into the trees, we will turn off random from row using T, and we'll start just outlining some of these houses with some nice detail. Of course, if you have a ton of different trees in here, you can choose between them or spam out a bunch of them using the T button, random from row. So you can have this kind of setup where you just get a nice, easy to use interface here. And of course you can turn it off and turn it on again, paint your terrain with it on if you want, all of that kind of stuff. Make some nice town centers and stuff like that. I use it in my own development in this way. After the rotation modes, we have after placement options. So if I go ahead and disable help me place now, you'll notice that the projectors I was just talking to you about are still there. You can delete these or remove them, whatever you want. If we go in here, we can look at after placement options. So all spawned object parent. If you want all of your objects here to be in one specific place after you've spawned them, that's a handy one to put in there. So you can put any transform in there and it will just parent everything that it makes to that transform. There's also a make prefab static. So if you have a bunch of prefabs in here or game objects and you want them to be static after for static batching or whatever, it'll just enable this flag up here after it's placed some stuff. So if we turn it on here and enable the tool and go to these houses here, and now if I disable the tool, select one of these fellas, you'll see that the static flag is on for these things, and it wasn't previously, which is why it's bold. So that's fine. That's self-explanatory. If we enable the tool again, down here to preview image size. So one of the nice features in Unity actually is if you hold shift and hit spacebar, it will full screen your scene view. So you can go ahead and use this tool in full screen, which I find very, very handy. So shift and spacebar will get you back out of that. Also, even in this view, if you hit escape, it will turn off help me place. So escape is a nice one to always keep in the back of your mind, because it does, like I said, it locks you into the hand tool. So if you're noticing you can't select anything else or whatever, it's because this is enabled. So let's have a look at control adjust sync amounts. So by default, it's enabled. You can hold control to adjust the sync amount. And I showed you at the start why that's so useful. We can disable this so that we can hold control and it doesn't affect how the system is used. We can also go in here, add it again, change this guy to control adjust sync amount. Everything has tooltips, by the way, so just mouse over it and it will tell you what it does. So if we change this to 0.3, you'll notice it goes all the way up off the, with very little movement, all the way up off the thing. So depending on the scale of your objects, you'd want to be changing this value. So 0.01 works for objects at this scale, so let's leave it at that. And then the reset current object sync amount. So if you've perhaps held control and you didn't mean to, and your object has now gone off into orbit, you can hit the reset current sync amount and it will reset it back to 0. So then we'll just reapply what we did before. This is quite small actually for what we want to do. So now it's back to the way it was. Okay, that concludes the configuration section. The next section is help me place internal settings. Now, these probably shouldn't be changed, to be honest. I have allowed it to be changed, but it's like if you want to configure how it looks, how it feels, this would be the place to do that. So the textures up here are just the things that are drawn in the top left here. Also so let's go backwards. Animate placement. If you turn this off, it'll remove the animation where it flies from the sky. Sorry, back on again. So it'll get rid of that rotation and animation. Show activity notification. You'll notice down here I'm getting quite a bit of spam from the tool saying that it's been activated or deactivated. We do get some Unity editor stuff, but that's just because I haven't reset my layout. But yeah, if I clear this off and I hit escape, you'll notice it gives me a piece of text here saying it's deactivated, visit the object again to re-enable it. If you don't need those anymore, maybe you've been using help me place for quite a while, you can just disable those notifications if they're getting on your nerves. Gizmo color, at the moment the only gizmo really that we have is this guy, this circle. So you can change the color of that using this setting. If it's quite hard to see, say you're working on a blue scene or water even. This will work with waters. Yeah, as long as there's a collider on it, it'll work with it. So yeah, you can change the color there to make it more visible for yourself. Then there's the blueprint material. So the blueprint is this blue see-through representation of the selected mesh. So you can change what that looks like using this material. Also, if you're using URP or HDRP or anything like that, then you should visit the README, because there is some extra setup required for this material, because standard obviously won't exist there. So there's stuff in the help file for that. So yeah, let's go back to our help me place and see what else we got. This is the overlay map game objects. So it doesn't find these by, like, if you double this up, if you quite like the feature. Let's tab them on. Let's move these ones away over here a bit and enable them. So say you've got a bunch of them now in the scene. You'll not be able to control them using tab unless you add them to this array. So sorry, let's just leave it at 4 and lock this guy, select our new game objects, drag them in, and now we can enable it again, unlock it as well, and hit tab, and it will enable or disable all of them. So this is something you can do at the prefab level if you really want that many. We found that 4 was more than enough for even the biggest projects that we were kind of using in test. Didn't require more than 4. There is a couple of other things I'd like to cover, like for example, if you wanted to change the hotkeys. At the moment we have A, D, these are all just the default ones. Or for changing rotation mode, T for turning on and off random from row, and tab for changing the visibility of the projectors. If you go in as far as scripts, configuration, you'll find a class in there called HMP keybinds. So you can change these to whatever you want. Whatever way you want to use the tool, you can configure it here, and it'll update the UI as well, so you'll never forget what you got there. Also, there is a way to turn off the keybinds in here. Sorry, I think I forgot to mention that one. It'll just make like if you're running out of space up here and you know what your keybinds are, you don't need to see them all the time. But it's nice, I think, to have them there anyway. So, but yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. Any questions, any issues, my contact details are on the asset. In the README file, you'll find descriptions of everything. The code is fully commented, and that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your interest, and I hope you find this useful. Bye-bye.